And it took me literally going back to those early days of my life, back to Massachusetts, back to being a older teenager, drinking and partying with my friends and having situationships, strong feelings for people in my social circle, and thinking about how I would behave and how they would behave in that situation. It took me doing that after all this time to really get what could have been going on that night there.
These proceedings are here to see that justice is done. And justice is, as any reasonable person would tell you, the finding of the truth. Only we have a problem here.
So there are days, and I'm learning as I go, where there is so much content, there's so much news, there's so much to do, so much to cover. It is truly overwhelming. And I'm starting to get the sense that that might be a norm, something I have to get used to.
I want to make an impact on what people think about politics, about the government, about the dangers of a one-party political system, which is what Massachusetts is.
Tensions soaring into the weekend as we get a new firsthand look at that fatal ICE shooting.
Michael McKee is no longer wearing scrubs. He's in a prison jumpsuit, and he will soon be in Ohio to face charges that not only did he shoot Monique and Spencer Tepe dead inside their home, but he plotted to do it.
And he was just listening, then he gestured to me like for me to just listen to the sound. The sound was like slapping.
No. Bo Buchanan was in the Westboro Police Department. He just got a lateral transfer or switched. He switched down to the Falmouth Police Department.
My head is spinning. So in the last 24 hours, I have been so busy, still reeling from the Lifetime movie on the Karen Reed story. The number one problem with this movie, how they stumbled upon John that morning and where he was on the lawn.
There he is. What?
Where?
Stop.
And thanks to Emily C., who just happened to get a video, we know exactly how much snow there was in Canton when John O'Keefe was found. For a quick second, we actually get a glimpse of exactly where John's body was. And for those of you that have been following me for a while, you know this because I broke it down maybe a month ago. And now we have the new sidebars from days 7 and 8 from the trial channel. And yes, once again, let me just plug the trial channel for doing such an incredible job in general, of course, but with these sidebars, using AI to get the voices right.
I noticed during Mr. Lally's direct of this past witness, he displayed multiple videos onto the screen without first asking permission of the court. The court had...
He asked for permission yesterday to do that.
Okay, yes. But my understanding was that we had to ask permission every time we wanted to put something on. Mr. Jackson yesterday was looking to display exhibits which were already in evidence, and the court berated us for that.
Yes. Well, because you just went back and said, put on the this, put on the screen that.
In fact, that's what Mr. Lally just did. And I'm not quibbling, Your Honor. I'm just asking, what are the rules? That's all.
Well, he at least stops it with, you know, Miss Gilman, could you play? But I thought you asked, let me know in advance if you intend to use them.
I'm going to ask permission every single time.
Okay, then you'll ask permission every time too.
I'm not even asking that he do it.
No.
But you...
So yesterday it was just sort of out of the blue.
There's some really good stuff in there that I definitely have to get to at some point. Unfortunately, that is not what we are doing here today. Today, I want to go back a little ways to last week, before the Lifetime movie, before Karen Reed's incredible interviews, which, don't worry, we've got plenty from and we're going to be using. But I want to talk about these Natalie the German texts or signal messages or whatever they are. I'm still not 100% sure. It might be a combination of the two. I don't know. 56 pages of text messages to Higgins. I mean, most married couples don't have that many pages. What was up with that? So first she says there are 4 messages per page. We hung out with Higgins several times a month and he lived 1 block away. If that's true, that's news to me. If we had a gathering or were headed out, I'd reach out to him. It says versus John. If we had a gathering or were headed out, meaning we, her and John, I'd be the one to reach out to him. And then she says there's only 10 days worth of text. So first, she says, well, I was only reaching out to him every once in a while when John and I were going out to invite him to go out. But then she contradicts herself and says, but there was only 10 days worth of text. Like, he and I were no big deal at all. It was not a big deal. There was also more than 56 pages of text messages. I think.
With the court's permission, I'd like to ask the witness to read the text messages that he was provided by Brian Higgins. For identification only.
You're certainly not asking him to read this whole document.
I expect to.
I'm going to see counsel.
All of them? Just a classic trial moment there. It's not text from a provider. It was printed out by Proctor, only a few blown up per page. It's not texts from the cell phone provider. It was printed out, or they were printed out by Proctor, only a few blown up per page. Now, I'm not sure if she says this to try to say that they're not legitimate. Well, Proctor's blowing it up, like he's literally and figuratively blowing up the text to make them seem like a bigger deal than they really were. You can kind of see how these happened, because these are separate text messages. So she sent the first one, then thought about it a little bit more, and then sent the second one, and then thought about it a little more and sent the third one. So they're separate thought streams, but they're a little bit contradictory. So then the second one is literally maybe 10 days worth of texts. So this is Karen Reed now distancing from the text messages and minimizing the significance of her interactions with Brian Higgins.
I didn't learn about the Higgins messages, what was in them, until the trial. I found out at the same time you guys did. So it's interesting.
Remember, John O'Keefe is now gone. He's dead. He's passed away. It's very common for people, when they lose somebody close to them, to idealize the relationship, to even idealize that person that they lost. Right? So it wouldn't be a huge shock to me if on some level, even though Karen Reed knows this isn't true, knows that this was not her reaching out on behalf of John, she wants it to be true. The anti-people, their version of the story is completely irrelevant, right? I mean, in other words, to me, nothing that Karen Reed is saying in here is inconsistent with everything else she has ever said. You'll note that for somebody who is so guilty, she's been awfully willing to talk.
I had an idea where this documentary was going before it came out. We ended the relationship with Terry, the documentarian, on a very bad note, over money, of course. I had former students from Bentley. I had former colleagues. I had friends that traveled on their dime to interview for this documentary. These are people who knew me in all sorts of facets of life that I was then told those interviews didn't make it in.
They didn't make it in, yeah.
But John's sister-in-law, who, to the best of my knowledge and to everyone's knowledge, I would guess, knows they didn't have the tightest relationship. Or a friend of his, there's been 2 friends of his I have never met. I was with John nearly every day for 2 years. I had dated him 20 years before that. And there's some guy and an old girlfriend who I never met. This is the closest you could find to John, people who never saw John and me interact. And yet I gave you friends, I gave you people from my parish, students, colleagues, and none of it made it in. So when the documentary came out, and I can't even remember when that was, I made a concerted effort. I will not watch that. What is the point to get upset? Because I know what didn't make it in.
And not only after the acquittal, but before the acquittal, which we now know was her intention with the A Body in the Snow documentary, to tell her story without having to testify.
Karen brought us in and the team brought us in to tell her story. That's what we wanted to do. And that's what we feel like we've done successfully in these 5 episodes.
Was Karen paid at all for her participation in this?
No, not at all. We didn't even buy them dinner. Feel kind of bad about that, but no.
And she took a big risk there because, yes, it was up through the verdict from the first trial. So she would hoped, of course, that it would come out after the acquittal. But that isn't what happened. And they, of course, knew they were taking that risk. So her voice is out there. And Hank Brennan took every opportunity he could to use her statements against her during the second trial.
I remember it, but I questioned do I remember it because it's been relived so much. I also wondered, did I say could I have hit him? Or was it told to me that I said I hit him? And I knew I never could have said that, so the closest I must have said was, did I hit him? I know I said I hit him, but did I really say it as many times as law enforcement's claiming I said it?
They had pulled into the driveway before me, so I'm presuming she saw my cracked taillight and was thinking, did you hit my son? I could sense from her that she was looking at me very warily. And then when John's nephew came home, I just wanted to see him and squeeze him and hug him. It was quite uncomfortable. I said, Dad, come upstairs to the master bedroom. I said, I think I need to leave. Because I think John's mother thinks I did something to John.
And his mother leans over the kitchen island and says to me, I think it looks like he got hit by a car. It looks like he got hit by a car. I'm not as clear as I would be if I hadn't been drinking.
You'll note that the people who are speaking from the Higgins and McAlbert's camp are not the people who are being accused of murder.
Brian Higgins.
Now, I ask you something incredibly important. If you were being accused of murder, would you just sit by and let that happen without speaking out? Oh, right. I'm sorry. Excuse me. I forgot about the charade of, quote, speaking out that the McAlberts did immediately following the acquittal.
Think real long and hard before you're a witness in a case because no one protects you. And it's very, very sad.
We did the civic duty, came and told the truth, and that's it.
And there is so much wrong with this interview. That's a whole separate 2 hours of video. And if you haven't seen what Sergio Denaro did in a collab on Truth Revealed on this video, please go do so.
Board games, cornhole, cookouts. This is a guy that was murdered, and it's atrocious for that family.
Now back to the matter at hand. As I said, I don't think these text messages are important at all in the way that these anti-people are painting them. They're just meaningless, with one exception. And of course, they're not paying attention to this part. And that is, it has come to light that Karen Read did not believe that Brian Higgins was responsible for the death of John O'Keefe pretty much at any point.
And this was one of my complaints as a journalist. That like, I'm like, yeah, the Higgins thing was undersold to me. I didn't really get the Higgins thing. I didn't talk about Higgins much. And Higgins was, by the second trial, the themes was Higgins did it, you know, but like Karen, I don't know if she didn't think that Higgins did it, but she never talked about Higgins ever. I didn't learn about the Higgins messages, what was in them, until the trial. I found out at the same time you guys did.
So what has come to light is that Karen Reed clearly did not feel that Brian Higgins was the aggressor. Now, to give her the benefit of every doubt, you could say, well, that's because somebody came to them in Steve Scanlon and said directly, look at the homeowner and his nephew. Fine. And that then, therefore, was the focus. And because, and this is something that I would love to ask Karen Reed if I had the chance, what did learning that Colin Albert may have been in that house trigger for you in your memory of John's relationship with Chris Albert and his sons? In other words, what really happened there? Was there any kind of confrontation? Did Colin Albert actually put beer cans on the lawn? Like, what actually happened between who she perceives to be Colin Albert and John O'Keefe? And I know in the end, it sounds like all was forgiven and it ended up inspiring a kind of silly, fun relationship between Chris Albert and Julie Albert and John, as he was never cracker in their in Julie's phone contacts.
Oh, get off my lawn!
But at some point, there was some tension there. And it seems that when Karen was told by Scanlon to look at the homeowner and Colin, Brian Albert and Colin Albert, that's what it inspired memories of. Like it triggered this awareness of, oh shit, John did have some interaction with them. And look, there doesn't have to have been any interaction between John and Colin Albert or any of the Albert sons in order for there to have been the possibility of a fight that included Colin Albert.
Based on his injuries, it looks to me like he got into a fight and fell backwards. There was not a single pathologist in either trial that didn't say the mortal wound came from falling backwards and hitting his head. That was agreed on. He had bruises on his hands. The prosecution tried to say that those came from IVs, but I've had many IVs. I've had them in my hands, and my hands never looked like that.
Colin Albert and Brian Albert were fighters. They've both gone to great lengths to try to pretend that isn't true, committing perjury as a result. But that doesn't change the fact that we know that that's true. We know it's true. We've seen videos of Colin fighting. We've seen videos of Colin literally threatening the lives of...
Yo, you're Benton's boys. I will beat all of your asses. I promise you, I will fuck you all up. Pull up, bitch. You're a bitch, bro. Fuck you. Yeah, fuck you.
You know, it reminds me of my 8th grade friends who like walked around in starter jackets, like Thug Life, my like white boy friends in rural Massachusetts. We know that Colin was tight with Brian Albert. We know that he looked up to him. We know they're both fighters. In fact, Brian Albert felt a great deal of pride about that, so much so that that's what he wanted us to see in his little appearance on Boston's Finest. So this is a part of their identity. Being a fighter is part of Brian Albert's identity. These people are silly, and their lying is silly.
Even if you're able to inadvertently make a phone call, they're all doing it in the middle of the night, all of them.
Well, it's kind of like a butt dial.
I believe I used the word butt dials.
Well, I used a phrase that people commonly used as a butt dial.
Not just a butt dial, but a butt answer and a butt hang up.
Yeah.
On both ends. Jen McCabe said the slew of phone calls to John at 1:45, between 12:30 and 1 o'clock, she had over a dozen phone calls to John. She's claiming those were all butt dials. What are the chances these people who were together all night are engaging in, if you count them, somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 butt phone actions? Answering, dialing, hanging up.
If I were Karen Reed, and I say this, I preempt this with, if anybody here knows who my father is a sports radio personality.
Now, I don't know if many people know about us. I recognized your last name, and I used to sleep with a guy every night.
It was Sunday night because Monday into Thursday night, right?
So I used to sleep with this guy every night, fall asleep to his voice on 660 WFAN.
Sports Radio 101.9 FM, The Fan, WFAN.
All right, 10:03 on a Saturday. Benigno, 877-337-6666 is the phone number.
So your dad is Joe Benigno.
100%.
How did your dad get that job?
So my father was a caller.
6666. The phone number, let's go to Joe in Saddle River. You're on Mets Extra, Joe.
Hi, Howie. How are you this afternoon?
Okay, how you doing?
Very good, thank you. Very good.
My father has this incredible memory. It's incredible. Before Google, I would just call my dad. And so he has that ability, and he has that ability with sports. And so
he's got that voice. Sorry, but he's got the voice for radio. The voice and face for radio, as they say.
Anybody, anytime, yes. Then the station held like a contest for overnight hosts. He won, and the rest is sort of history.
Yeah, Sam, because I remember your dad's first day for whatever reason, because I remember him being a caller, and then I remember him having a show.
Is Adam Gase coaching his team 3 years from now? I want you absolutely. What do you think?
No shot.
I don't think so. I mean, the way this is right now, how could I expect that?
And back then I wouldn't know or care, but I just didn't know how that came to fruition. So that's great. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously Dad had a hugely successful career. He's still out there doing it, which is great. I love when he comes on with his headset.
I, as a Jet fan, look at now as one of the worst moves in the history of the franchise. I mean, it is right up there.
Right, but Joe, don't you think that's short term? In the long term, is it going to be good or no?
But Teak, could I have a football season?
Doesn't care. I love it. It's so great to me.
I was raised with a kind of macho guy as a father who used to tell me from the time I can remember, really like I'm talking about 2 or 3 years old, that I should be aware of the fact that men might have ulterior motives for wanting to be friends. Okay, so I may not be a great person to talk to about this because this is me reminding you to like this video, like the video, comment, subscribe, like this video. If I were Karen Reed and I knew that I had been having this flirty text interaction for these 3 weeks prior to this night, and I knew that it was possible that that guy who I ignored and who had sent me the well text.
But it bothered you enough to send her a text, didn't it?
No, it was a flirtatious text. It was just, that was it.
It bothered you enough to send her a text that said, with 6 M's behind it.
Okay.
And, well.
Well.
Correct?
Well, it wasn't like that. It was, well. Well.
Well?
Well.
Well?
She didn't respond. That's it.
Just, well, like a well in the ground.
Well, I think you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think you do too, sir. You meant, well?
Well?
Well.
When are you going to pay attention to me?
And ignored in a way that was very intentional. I was thinking about how I would behave in a drunk situation If I'm ignoring somebody outright, she's placing herself right in front of Brian Higgins, not on the other side of the bar. But at one point, she is literally, I think when he sends the well text message,
well,
she is literally to his right. So she is placing herself directly in front of him, leaping over the bar, screaming at whoever's next to her. It's sort of like he's peacocking with the fighting with Brian Albert. Well, she's doing kind of something similar. She's performing in front of him. Truthfully, first of all, I don't think I would have ever let John go into the house knowing that Brian Higgins was likely going to be there, number one, not without me, because I would have been worried that something like this could have happened. And then number two, the second that I see John O'Keefe with that piece of glass in his nose, the way she describes, on that lawn, the second I see that, the first thought in my head is, oh my God, I left John alone with Brian Higgins. I mean, I would have been so aware of that. I never would have let John O'Keefe walk into that house or walk near that house without me, knowing that there was even a slight possibility that Brian Higgins could have been in the house. Even if I didn't know the Jeep, didn't see the Jeep, didn't know he was in the house, but knew there was the possibility that he was in that house, I would never have let him out of my sight. Why, in God's name, would I trust that Brian Higgins would have my best intentions in mind? Especially after I have treated him the way I just treated him, performing in front of him, which sends every message that I possibly could send that I have feelings for him. Because that is not how an indifferent woman behaves. If I'm indifferent, if I really don't care about Brian Higgins, then why wouldn't I say, hey, how are you? Nice to see you. I would say something. Hello. Because I don't care. And I'm trying to send a message of indifference. Indifference is not ignoring somebody and then placing yourself right in front of them, jumping over them, practically touching them at the bar drinking. That is not indifference. That is I am performing in front of a man whose attention I want squarely focused on me.
John glances at his phone as well to check the time. It's getting late and almost closing. Karen initiates a group hug, putting her right arm around Matt McCabe and her left arm around Jen McCabe. John, however, seems to take a step back. Karen chats with Brian and Chris Albert, but her eyes never find Higgins. Imagine the storm of emotions he must be weathering, standing just inches away from the woman who has consumed his thoughts for weeks. She's right there, so close, yet he is helplessly bound by his own fear, unable to utter a single word. There's nothing more excruciating than being invisible to the one you desire most.
You see, the only problem with this theory is that it doesn't really hold up when you take the time to watch this Waterfall video when Karen is the subject of your attention. And something bothered me for a long time. I mentioned this when I was live with Loophole Lawyer last week. Sergio De Niro did an incredible breakdown of Brian Higgins' testimony.
We've already covered the murder. And so Higgins is stuck in this mindset where he knows the outcome of the evening and he knows that Karen Reed wasn't a part of it. And so it doesn't occur to him at this point to try to incriminate her. He's more set on trying to not incriminate himself than to try to incriminate her. Again, that's because when we saw him building motive before, we hadn't covered John O'Keefe's death yet. And so Higgins has walked through this from before his death to now we are after his death, and we have gone back to before his death again, but we have already gone past it once in this testimony here. And so he's not going to be able to put himself all the way back into that mindset again, because John O'Keefe has died while he was on the witness stand. So let's see.
And he's very clear about it. I think it comes out exactly like that. I did not feel ignored. Sergio, at that point, determines that was a truthful statement. There's body language. There's ways to communicate to somebody without actually speaking. You're going to learn right now from Sergio Gennaro from the Truth Revealed channel precisely why it is that I couldn't believe Brian Higgins felt ignored by Karen.
When John walked into the waterfall, were you already there? Yes. Karen walked in with him. Yes. But she did not greet you, did she? I think they kind of went like in different directions. Evasion, right? This is deception. She may have greeted him, or Brian Higgins didn't want to look bad. But we got to figure out the options, okay? Once we figure out deception, we got to ask ourselves, why? Why is he being deceptive about this? So did she greet you or did she not greet you? And it would be really easy for him to say, nope, she didn't say a word to me. That's it. That'd be a perfectly straight up legitimate answer to the question. But instead he becomes evasive here, which tells me that she did greet him. He can't say no and he's being evasive. That is what this means, is she did greet him. Now we have a lot of evidence to the contrary. So let's keep this in mind and see if all of this evidence that we have could be wrong. Did she actually greet him while he was there? Because that's what the verbiage is telling us. So did she greet you? No. Right. So she walked over towards the corner of the bar and John came over and greeted you and then walked over and joined her, correct? Yes. Karen didn't stop what she was doing when she was over in the corner of the bar and come over and say hi to you. He says, I didn't have any interaction with her that night. No. Now, he's choosing his words carefully here. He didn't have any interaction with her. And this interaction is in reference to this interaction here is in reference to the question, which is Karen didn't stop what she was doing and come over. And so he says, no interaction. Now, she basically ignored you the entire evening. So he uses the word ignored. She ignored you the entire evening. And he says, that's not how I interpreted it. No, that's interesting. Let's look at this for deception. It seems like he's not answering the question or that it's evasive or what is this telling us here? Let's see. The question is, she basically ignored you the entire evening. That's not how I interpreted it. So he uses he uses past tense and interpreted it is active voice. We don't have any repeating words here. We have no sign of deception here. So that's not how I interpreted it. No. By my own rules, I have to label this as a truthful statement. What he is saying, Higgins is saying, is that her not talking to him wasn't ignoring him. So how does this all fit together? Well, nobody seems to be talking about eye contact. If you've ever flirted with anyone in your life or had any sort of a relationship with someone that everybody in the room wasn't aware of, you make eye contact. There's a lot of ways of communicating with somebody, coming from me, right? The deception detection expert. There are a lot more ways other than verbal that you can communicate with people. What Higgins is telling you here, she may have greeted him. She did. They made eye contact. That's why this was evasive here. You're seeing reaffirmation of that here. That's not how I interpreted it. So they did communicate, even though they were across the room. I didn't ask you how you interpreted it. I asked you what she did. Did she ignore you or did she pay attention to you? And he says, no, this is a compound question, so it's problematic. So he says, did she ignore you or did she pay attention to you? It's problematic because he starts to say, no, she didn't ignore me or no, she didn't pay attention to me. And now we don't realize what question he's answering here. So Attorney Jackson says, so she paid attention to you, came over and said hello, shook your hand, gave you a hug. And then Higgins says, well, just because somebody didn't come over doesn't mean they ignored you. So interesting. He is being deceptive here. Now, this is a explanatory statement with a negative statement. But what he's doing is he is underhandedly telling you the truth. What he's literally saying is she didn't come over, but that doesn't mean that she didn't communicate. And that is truthful, but he's not telling you that we made eye contact. So he is insinuating the communication and he's phrasing it in a very deceptive way. So keep in mind here that the deception is that he's not telling you that they made eye contact. He's telling you that they made eye contact without telling you that. And that's why there's deception. Originally, I thought Brian Higgins was being difficult here, but he's actually saying they made eye contact. Brian Higgins won't allow the ignored comment because they had some inside communication. It's like you didn't even need to exist. I think that's dramatic. That's what Higgins says. And then he says, no, I don't look at it that way. So there's huge sensitivity here because Higgins, in his mind, he desperately wants to say, we made eye contact and communicated probably in a far more meaningful way than anybody who went around shaking people's hands and hugging. But he's not going to say that because that incriminates him, or that's going to open up a whole new line of questioning here. He's trying to be disagreeable, but at the same time, he's trying to not incriminate himself. So he's showing deception while he is subtextually giving you the truth. Did she ignore you or not? Now, because Brian Higgins is not allowing this, he's not saying she ignored me. He's saying we had communication, but he's being deceptive about it. So he's going to get the question over and over again. And he says, no, she did not ignore me. Oh, okay. So he finally broke and he says, she did not ignore me. Now you're saying, okay, but that's an uncontracted denial and that's deception, which means she did ignore him. No, because, and we covered this at great length in another video, a uncontracted denial is deceptive when it's the first time that it's asked. Because when you re-ask the same question, when you make the same accusation multiple times, that person's anger level increases. And eventually that contraction will become uncontracted as they're trying to forcefully tell you. So if you take an innocent person and you say, did you kill her? That person will say, no, I didn't kill her. Then you say, I don't believe you. You're a liar and a murderer. Did you kill her? They'll say, no, I did not kill her. They will uncontract that to make it a forceful denial. It's deceptive the first time because there's no reason for a truthful person to be that forceful right off the bat. They're truthful. They know the truth. They believe that if you hear the truth, you'll believe it because it's the truth. And so here we have the word ignore, and I believe that I bolded it up here so that we could find it again quickly. Ignore. So this is not the first time that he's been accused of being ignored. And so the uncontracted denial at this point makes sense. He says, no, she did not ignore me. And that's the truth, right? So one person, she didn't come over and talk to you and say hello to catch up with you. He says, I don't know that I was the only person, but I was one of the people that she didn't say hello to. Yes. So now we have missing time here, which is the eye contact that he's not telling you about. And the rest of this is he's agreeing like, yeah, I don't know that I'm not the only person in the bar that she didn't say hello to, but she didn't say hello to me. Yes, that's correct. Present tense, she treated you sort of like a stranger. And he says, I don't feel that way. No, this is a truthful statement. Did that upset you that she ignored you or didn't pay attention to you? Okay, you got to ask yourself at this point, why is he asking the question this many times? What kind of a response is he trying to elicit? And so let's keep that in mind. I did not feel ignored and didn't upset me at all. So he stumbles over his words here, but he basically says, I did not feel ignored. Now we have the uncontracted denial here because the word ignored has been repeated so many times that the uncontraction is okay. And then he says didn't. So he recontracts it here to say upset him. So again, this is all indicators of truthfulness for us. And so I'm going to believe him when he is truthful. So he did not feel ignored and he didn't get upset. It didn't upset me at all. He wasn't upset by that. And that's because they were making eye contact from across the room. They were communicating in their own way.
The truth is, he never felt ignored. And I couldn't figure that out for a long time until I went back and watched the Waterfall video recently where my focus was Karen Reed. And for that, I have Loophole Lawyer to thank because he was asking, where is the moment that triggers Brian Higgins at the bar from having a good time to wanting to beat John O'Keefe up? And so I went back looking for the trigger. Shouting, leaning over him to talk to the person across from him. Like, that isn't just ignoring, or that isn't sending a message that he doesn't matter. That's sending a very different message, actually. That's sending an intentional message, a message of, I want you to look at me while I ignore you. And that could even be very confusing for a man who is drunk.
But it bothered you enough to send her a text, didn't it?
No, it was a flirtatious text. It was just, that was it.
It bothered you enough to send her a text that said, with 6 M's behind it.
Okay.
And, well,
correct?
Well, it wasn't like that. It was, well, that's it.
Just well, like a well in the ground.
I think you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think you do too, sir. You meant, well, when are you gonna pay attention to me?
No, that's not correct.
Well, why are you ignoring me?
It's not correct.
Well, am I chopped liver?
Or, well, what's the deal, Karen?
When you texted her, well, at the waterfall, she ignored that text to you, correct? Well, that was the only text I sent that night to her, yes. Did she ignore the text, Mr. Higgins? And he says, I don't know. So I don't know now is just, it's a different way of telling you that he communicated with her in a different way. This is missing time. So I don't know means that there was an action that he's not telling you. And that action is nonverbal communication. It's technically not possible to not know the answer to that question. So did she ignore the text? So when he says, I don't know if she ignored it or not, you know right off the bat that's not a truthful statement because she either ignored it or she didn't. Because ignore it means you either addressed it or you didn't. And she either did that or she didn't. And so Higgins knows that. So the missing information here means glances. It means nonverbal communication. Did she respond to the text? She did not respond. All right. So meaning she didn't text back, but the uncontracted denial here means she did respond, but she didn't text. So again, we have, you gotta be right in the verbiage here in order to understand what's going on in his mind and why his mind is picking these words. So she did not respond is a lie. She did respond, but there's no text message.
That could even send the message that I like you, but I don't want John, my boyfriend, to see me talking to you because he's already suspicious of the fact that I've been talking to you. Now, I know what many of you are thinking. You're thinking, but she had already ghosted him for the days before. Well, Brian Higgins is right when he says, well, not exactly. She sent him a message that said,
Have not heard from you. Phone works.
Phone works, and then an emoji with arrows going like both ways.
Thought you were all set. With talking? No.
The phone works both ways. And I will tell you, as a woman who has had plenty of situationships before they became any kind of sexual or intimate or relationships of any kind, I can tell you that I'm not the kind of person that's just going to start chasing somebody. If they're not responding to me or if they're not reaching out to me, the message that I am going to get from them is they're not interested in me.
It wasn't on after. We would have saw so much more in terms of texting after they met privately if Karen was into him.
Home. Alive. Cool. Thoughts?
Question mark?
Maybes. You? What? You asked my thoughts. You didn't answer. I don't know my thoughts. Okay, I think I get it.
It's possible that she goes there with the intent of him making a move. He doesn't do it. It's awkward because of that. And instead, he says, look, if you're not going to leave John, like, we're not doing this.
Defendant texted me, phone works, and the emoji with the arrows going both ways. Clearly, after she left, the communication died down substantially, which makes sense because she was upset, which she would be upset if she threw herself at him and he rejected her. Women don't take that well, guys. So you're going to have conflict here between the two of them if he rejected her, which appears he did.
Good riddance, like any type of common ground, just to try and elicit a response again.
But I want a drink. Really? I'll give you Hardy's digits. Who?
Question mark?
Hardy from 98.5 Midday Show. He hangs out at the Currents sometime. He's a spokesperson for Recovery Center of America. Haha. I don't have a problem.
Had there been a real passion, we would have seen a lot more.
My original thought was exactly what you're saying, that they didn't have chemistry. Here's the one thing that I have a hard time with, though, and that disputes it for me. The next morning, she texts him, John died.
Saturday, 11:54 a.m. John died.
I think Brian Higgins, throughout, the one thing that was very consistent from his text messages to Karen Reed, he was hesitant. He wasn't sure whether he should trust that she really liked him. At one point, he's even questioning whether it's Karen that's sending the texts at all. He's sort of almost suspicious that it might be John sending these texts, right? The stuff about, like, did we kiss, right? He's like, wait, why don't you remember that? And Again, to be fair to both of them, a lot of their interactions were infused with alcohol, were under the influence of alcohol, both in person in the bar at the Hillside and via text. And you can see that there is a distinct difference between how Karen Reed talks to him, Brian Higgins, when she's drinking or buzzed versus when she's not. Okay. And he even calls her out on that.
Do you remember anything you said to me the other night? Yes. I deleted it because I didn't want to do my own text walk of shame, but I'm pretty sure I remember everything. Have you always had trouble accepting compliments? All yours came to me after a day of drinking. You were way more all over me that day. So what? Don't most compliments come that way? Like all over me with compliments and how you felt. It was 3:30 a.m.
My point is to try to say that she had wanted nothing to do with him and he was angry about it, and that's why he was mad at John. That never made sense to me. That never made sense to me, because at no time before this night did Brian Higgins show any aggression towards John. If anything, he seemed to imply that that wasn't what he wanted, that he didn't want to just hook up with Karen behind John's back. Yes, he was still willing to talk to her because she's an attractive woman and he's still a man.
There are girls
that's
that
interesting.
are so at a level that we want, not physically, but also mentally, that we will forego hooking up with. And sort of Brian was doing that here, wanting her to take control. He was insecure with this entire time, but it's not as if he wasn't willing to go behind John's back.
But he wasn't, as far as any of us can tell, going to pursue a sexual relationship with Karen Reed while she was in a relationship with John O'Keefe. That's what the messages say over and over again. And think about this, okay? And I know people don't like to think of it this way, but up until this night, okay, a couple of things you really have to be mindful of. Number one, before they meet up in person, they are having an interaction about what it means to have a drink at somebody's house. Karen is saying, I'm an adult, I'm 40-something years old. I know what it means when a man asks me over to have a drink. Okay. So they have already been talking about the fact that when she goes over there to have a drink, it very likely means some type of intimacy, some type of sexual interaction. However, when they come together, that's exactly not what happens. Now, Loophole Lawyer argued, oh, that's because when they got together, they realized they had no chemistry, and that's why nothing happened. I don't think that's what happened at all. They already know each other. If they didn't have any chemistry, they would already know that, right? So I think what happened here was neither one of them wanted to be the aggressor. Neither one of them wanted to be the one that made the first move or made the big move.
So, okay, should I drive around W. Roxbury yelling your name? Haha, no. Where are you now? Newbury. Do you really want to come over? Only if you want me to. Can you take charge? I thought we already settled this. Haha. Okay, well, I am in my car and now getting on the highway. This feels like I am forcing you. Not at all. I am game.
So Brian Higgins wasn't going to chase her. She wanted that from him. He wasn't going to give it to her.
The Bryans are heavily intoxicated and feeling aggressive. They have identified their adversary in John O'Keefe and are acting out their primal rage with a male display of dominance, otherwise known as peacocking.
Now, we know Karen was ambivalent. And what does ambivalent mean? Ambivalent means I'm not sure. I'm in the middle. Part of me wants to do one thing and part of me doesn't. So she's ambivalent about Brian Higgins, and that's very clear from the way she approaches these text messages. But he's not ambivalent about her. He likes her. He's all in on her. He's ambivalent about whether he should trust that she really likes him. In other words, he's very clear about how he feels about Karen. He's just not sure that he can trust that she really likes him. And he's not willing to take the chance on that, right? He doesn't want to be used. He doesn't want to be made a fool of. He doesn't want to be embarrassed, which we all can understand. Now, out of all of the text messages that happened between them, one is the single most important. And it's not the well message that we get from Brian Higgins. So 11:30 that night at the Waterfall with Karen Reed literally standing right in front of him. She's standing right in front of him. Okay. Making a show out of whatever she's doing.
Where you gather around your friends, you laugh extra loud so that they see you. And I get what you're saying.
Positioning herself to be directly in front of Brian Higgins when he writes the well, Karen message with several question marks. That message indicates strong emotion. That's the implication of the message. What, Karen? What are you doing? Because she is performing in front of him, okay? She's not sending the message that she doesn't like him. She's sending the message that she does. And it took me literally going back to those early days of my life, back to Massachusetts, back to being an older teenager, drinking and partying with my friends and having situationships, strong feelings for people in my social circle, and thinking about how I would behave and how they would behave in that situation. It took me doing that after all this time to really get what could have been going on that night there. And that is what brings me back to these messages. We have Turtle Boy telling us outright that at no time in his interactions with Karen Reed did she outright point the finger at Brian Higgins. The next morning after John O'Keefe is dead, by noon on January 29th, 2022, Karen has reached out to Brian Higgins to say John is dead. And of course, Brian Higgins, the same guy who sent that well text the night before, all of a sudden has disappeared. We're talking about hours earlier, he's sending the well text. So you're going to tell me that just 7 hours later, not even a full 12 hours later, Karen Reed sends a message to him saying John is dead, and Brian Higgins is so convinced that Karen Reed is the murderer of John O'Keefe that he doesn't respond to that? Nothing like, I'm so sorry, Karen. Oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. What the fuck? What's going on? Nothing. I'm sorry, but if you don't think that's incriminating, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. The only reason that I can come up with for why Brian Higgins did not feel like an aggressor to Karen Reed is because she did not realize that he had those strong feelings for her. That from Karen's perspective, it was kind of a game. That she really didn't understand that not only Brian Higgins, but both Brian and John had these very real feelings for her. That they really did care about her, right? It seemed like when she drank especially, Karen got very insecure about these relationships, right? That they didn't really care about her, that John didn't really care about her, that Brian Higgins didn't really care about her, not enough to want to pursue her. I could see how, from Karen's point of view, him not pursuing her sexually could feel like a rejection. Whereas from Brian Higgins' point of view, he didn't want that. So he felt rejected because he felt like she didn't really like him if she didn't want to leave John for him. And two things can be true at the same time, guys. Karen can have very strong feelings for John and not want to leave the relationship and be very attracted to Brian Higgins. Right? They just didn't want the same thing. Karen was looking for kind of a side piece at the time, maybe just even in that moment. And Brian Higgins wanted a relationship. That's it. It was simple. If you are drunk, Brian Higgins, and he was drunk, make no mistake, we see that very clearly in those interactions with Chris Albert as he's walking out of the bar. He's like, all over, like with his hand in his face. He was wasted. So wasted Brian Higgins, who's been play fighting with Brian Albert, right? Which we call peacocking, no doubt. And then has Karen Reed right in front of him, not talking to him, but That's clearly where her attention was, wanting him to focus on her. Who is the problem? The problem is this woman has a boyfriend, and so I can't have her. And if the boyfriend isn't in the picture, then I can have her. Now, that may not be logical to you, and it may not even be logical to me. But if I am a 17-year-old man, drunk, and I've got this woman who I like enough to want to pursue some type of meaningful romantic relationship with, in my distorted, drunk, testosterone-infused logic, John O'Keefe is the problem there. And of course, there was no intention to murder John, obviously. It was just to beat him up. It was to get into a fight the same way that any other 17-year-old male in that same situation might feel compelled to want to do. So it took me a long time to get to this place where I understood this way, but it's the only way that the things that I know to be true about this situation fit together. It's the only way to make sense of Karen Read's text messages, Karen Read's behavior on that night, and importantly, the behavior of Brian Higgins with his unwell text, and then his unwillingness to respond to Karen's follow-up text message, the most important of all, that tells Brian Higgins John is dead. 11:50, I think, something in there, a.m. on January 29th of 2022, with no response from Brian Higgins. Now, the only other thing I will say about this, why then would Karen Read minimize her interactions with Brian Higgins after the fact? Why then would Karen Read not immediately assume it was Brian Higgins who did this? Never underestimate the power of denial. And if those text messages had anything to do with the death of John O'Keefe from Karen's point of view, it may very well be too close to it's my fault. Now, none of us would blame Karen in that situation, right? Because it wasn't her fault. She did not make the choices that Brian Higgins and Brian Albert made that night. But those text messages may very well have been the catalyst for what led to the fight, that led to the fall, that led to John O'Keefe's death. And if that is the case, I could imagine that might make me feel some sense of guilt or blame or responsibility, even though that's not fair. It's not accurate. That's not what happened. It's also possible, because there's a lot of we's in these text messages to Natalie, we meaning me and John. It's also possible that there was some romanticizing of their dynamic happening, which is very common. After somebody passes, we idealize our relationship with them. We idealize who they were to us. Very common, because they're gone. That's a part often of how somebody wants to remember their relationship with a lost loved one. Now, would any of us blame Karen Read for any of this? No. But it is a way, whether it's the way, it is a way to explain why she would want to minimize Brian Higgins to her, the significance of him, so much so that she won't allow herself to even consider him a viable suspect in this crime, even though everything points directly to
Brian Higgins.
And I'm not suggesting that it would be Brian Higgins alone. And the other thing I want to always maintain, yes, there is the death of John O'Keefe, and that's what brings us all to this discussion. However, there are multiple crimes thereafter as part of a cover-up and an intention to place the blame on an innocent woman in Karen Read. There are many other people that are indicted in that set of crimes. But in the murder itself, What I can tell you is Brian Higgins and Brian Albert were undoubtedly involved. I still place Colin at the house. Whether or not he was involved, I don't know, but he was there. And they didn't want him to be there, but he was there because Allie wasn't. And then the Alberts, McCabe's, and Higgins contract not to tell the truth together. That is a different set of crimes.
It is the defense counselor's duty to protect the rights of the individual, as it is the prosecution's duty to uphold and defend the laws of the state. Justice for all. Only we have a problem here.
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through eyes covered in ink and bleach. Cross out the ones who heard my cries and watched me weep. I love everything. Fire spreading all around my room. My world's so bright, it's hard to breathe, but that's alright. Hush.
This is me reminding you to like this video, comment, subscribe, like this video.